Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm going to be your host this evening, Jim Nettles. And before we get started, let's go around and see who is bringing stuff to add to that to be read pile. So, Laura, you are up first.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Laura Ashwood. I write heartwarming romance in contemporary and historical Western. I also write women's fiction, and I live in Minnesota. Happy to be here.
Randee?
Hi there. My name is Randee Dawn. I am an entertainment journalist, but I am also a debut author whose book just came out about a week or two ago. I write funny fantasy, but I also have been known to dabble in horror, so kind of cover the spectrum there. Nice to meet y'all.
PA?
Hi, I'm PA Cornell. I write science fiction, fantasy, and horror, primarily short fiction, but I have a novella coming out on September 12th, which I think will be in the past by the time this airs. But yeah, so pretty exciting time.
Hildie?
Hi, everybody. Hildie McQueen here. I write Highlander medieval romance. I am celebrating the release and ending of a series today, so I can't wait to discuss that with everybody. I'm so excited to be here.
And Nancy?
Hey y'all, Nancy Naigle here. I'm from Virginia and I write small town love stories. And I've been really lucky to have several that have aired on Hallmark Channel. And this past week, I have been zipping around New York City as they released The Shell Collector on Fox Nation. So it's the very first Fox original movie.
So let's go starting to find out what we're going to be adding to that pile. So, Laura, why don't you tell us a little bit about the book you're bringing to us?
My book is called Summer at Bluefin Bay. It actually releases tomorrow. It's my first women's fiction, and it is about forgiveness and the power of found family. It's how loss can bring the most unexpected blessings sometimes. It's set in North Carolina in a small town, and it's basically about what happens when a woman finds out that her husband has a second family that she had no idea, and she gets left to care for his 12-year-old daughter and what she decides to do with that.
So in other words, another cheerful romance.
It's more women's fiction than romance. There's a slight hint of romance in it, but...
So just a little bit more. So what kind of story we're going to get out of this? Is it going to be the journey she's going through raising her child? Yeah,
it's kind of a journey of self-discovery. You know, what she thought was her life and what she thought was her, you know, her base, it just got completely shattered. And through the journey of trying to deal with a 12-year-old that, you know, lost her whole family too, she discovers herself and the self she always wanted to be, but didn't realize she wasn't. So, oh no, we got people coming into the Airbnb.
That's what happened when everybody packs into a house for convention.
Sorry about that.
So, Randee, how about you? Tell us about this new debut release.
It's a debut. It's really,
a debut.
Actually, it's a horror. No, it's not a horror story. So it's called Tune In Tomorrow. That is the cover right there. It is about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures starring humans, but it's aimed at mythical creatures. And I'm an entertainment journalist. I've basically put a whole bunch of how the sausage is made, backstage shenanigans and wackiness, and, you know, a lot of the tropes you may be familiar with, but not quite seen before in a fantasy light. So that is Tune In Tomorrow.
PA?
Yeah, my book is called Lost Cargo, and it's a science fiction novella about people that were on their way to a new colony, and during the journey, something goes wrong and they get stranded on a moon that is not a safe place to be. And they also have a really hard time being rescued from there. Also, they are strangers to each other. So they're having to work together, not knowing each other at all, and they're from very different backgrounds. So so it's not easy for them, basically.
Hildie? And you're on mute.
Sorry, my computer forgot to work. I was like, where's that mute? So I am celebrating the Wildcat this way, which is the last book in the Clan Ross series. And this is in the medieval Scottish times. And the story kicks off with Gideon, who is the youngest brother to the laird. And he is left pretty much for dead. His companions went to get help. And in the meantime, these two older ladies find him and they throw him on a cart and take him back home and decide to nurse him themselves. So when he had convulsions, ended up on the floor, half naked. They didn't know what to do with him. So they went to go get help. And they get this girl who is the farmer's daughter to come help, and she walks in and she doesn't believe them, but she walks in and here's this naked guy on the floor, and she looks at his face, I guess after a while, and sees that it's the guy that she's had a crush on since she was a wee lass. And so it goes from there. So it's a cool story. It's sexy, it's fun, and it's I think a memorable wrap to this best-selling series of mine.
And we're going to find out later on where she tied the blue ribbon.
Yes.
So Nancy, tell us a little bit about what you're bringing.
Oh gosh, so this week I am celebrating the release of a short Christmas story called Mission Merry Christmas. And it was a lot of fun for me because this has actually got a Caribbean island setting. So there's no real snow happening in this story. But I've got a sports therapist who is doing a favor for somebody and going down to take care of a ball player who tweaked his knee doing something he shouldn't have been doing under contract. And so it's supposed to be all hush hush. And she's just had a very unfortunate dismissal from the sports agency that she's been working with. So she is headed to the islands. She meets this curmudgeon of a guy, is trying to get him back up on his feet. And during it all, they also deliver a pseudo white Christmas island style. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of experiment with what we could do in the islands, in the balmy, sunny weather in the winter to bring kind of a white Christmas to his young nephew. I had a really good time with it. And I even ended up doing some paper snowflake designs and things in the back of the paperback for people. And it's just a nugget of a story. It'll fit right in your stocking.
So Randee, let's talk a little bit here about kind of the setting, the world that people are going to step into. So when the readers come in, Ed, you're going to be setting up here for something that's going to feel familiar, but not quite so familiar. So tell us a little bit more about the world building, kind of the universe everybody's stepping into.
Right. So this is a contemporary book. I mean, when we first meet Star, she's working in a diner that we've all been in before. It's a familiar territory, but pretty quickly after she is invited to come on the show, she has to step through some gates and she ends up flat on her face at first through the portal, through the veil, into the other side of things where the Fae live. And that's where they have their studio. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to pair a certain amount of familiarity that we have with a little bit about TV, the behind the scenes. Here's the stage sets. Here's the gigantic, really cold studio that everything has to be filmed in. Here are the dressing rooms. But there's a lot of, but all these fantasy creatures are running around. So her executive producer is like a fawn. There is a receptionist / security guard who's a dragon. And at first, she kind of walks into what feels familiar, but very slowly becomes less and less familiar. In fact, when she first gets over there, she thinks everybody's just in costumes or cosplaying, or they have some really good animatronics. And so it takes a little while before the penny drops with Star. And then the world begins to open up a bit more. You know, the other parts that we get to see later on is that the workers on the show, when they have downtime, they are given the ability to transport to safe places within the Fae universe. So one of these places that they visit is called Centaur Park instead of Central Park. And there are, in fact, centaurs running around playing capture the flag and all sorts of things like that. So some of the stuff is very familiar. They even go to a convention at one point in a hotel. But some of it is just meant to be alien and mystical and strange. And the one other instance, for example, is the executive producer and the director have offices, but they're glamored. So they can change the glamour, but sometimes it's a woods, sometimes it's a park, sometimes it's mountains. And there's one character who likes to have a whole rainforest as his office. So that's really the setting that all of this is set among.
And however I can get that functionality, I'd really like to be able to do that in my office too.
Same here.
Or snap my fingers and make it a lot cleaner. So PA, tell us a little bit about the universe that we're going to be stepping in for you and for you guys.
Okay, well, it is in the far future, obviously, if there's interstellar travel. But the main setting takes place on a moon that was originally slated for being terraformed and to be used as a hunting ground, like for sportsmen, like wealthy sportsmen. So the thing is, it was abandoned kind of midway through this project, but not before they made it quite dangerous for these people. It was supposed to be a challenge. So they were genetically engineering creatures that are basically monsters that now populate this moon, aside from some of the just natural dangers that were already there, just from it being an alien environment. And so my 6 main characters are stranded there with very little to survive with. Their time is running out for rescue. They're very far from Earth or from the colony they were heading to. So communication is an issue, and even communication between each other, because obviously they're in a terrible situation. So that creates stresses. My main character that the story's told through, she has her own kind of background, like baggage that she's dealing with as well. And the group is kind of depending on her to guide them to this place they need to get to for rescue. And that's not necessarily her top priority, at least at the beginning of the book. So while she does want to help these people and get them to safety, she also has her own agenda that they don't know about, that she's kind of, it's always on the back of her mind. So, yeah.
Hildie, so since we're wrapping up the series, and obviously these might involve my people, the Highlands, tell us a little bit about what we're walking into, coming in to wrap up the series, but kind of tell us a little bit more about what we're walking into this time.
Well, this whole entire series takes place, and as you can see in my background, where it's kind of like rocky and the ocean or the sea, takes place on the Isle of Uist, which is part of the Scottish Hebrides, which are the islands that are west of the Isle of Skye. And so it's never really summer there. It's sort of a cool climate. But in my world, I don't know for sure. I have tried to do the research, but in my world, there's the Clan Ross is just huge. They have hundreds of warriors. There's dense forests, and if you know anything about the Scottish Hebrides, there's absolutely very few trees there. The Vikings, at some point during history, came and deforested all of the islands, so the people couldn't build boats and catch them or whatever. So but they're beautiful. But they've never been densely populated as I make them be. So in the middle, when you come into the Wildcat, it's a clash of a battle between these insurgents who are trying to come in off of these ships. They can't quite figure out, but it starts off with a battle scene, and that's how the hero gets wounded. But they can't figure out if it's this ship that keeps docking, or they keep seeing the ship off the northern shore of the island, or if it's people within the clan, because they seem to be very good at disappearing. They get into these battles, they go after them, and then all of a sudden they can't find them. So it becomes obvious that they are somebody from there, because they know the land. You have to know the land to disappear the way they do. So the youngest, like I said, he is kind of trying to figure out what he wants, who he is, and during this time of being injured, when he is forced to kind of sit back and think about things, he kind of starts noticing that his life is perhaps the entire time he's been kind of like a puppet for the clan, for his brothers. They're all overprotective. They never send him on these, crazy battles that they all go off to. Even his mother is kind of plans everything for him. So he's kind of trying to strike out on himself, but then he kind of gets himself into a little bit of trouble because it's a little too cray-cray. So the world is kind of fiction and truth put together, and I think it's familiar to the readers now, but I think that from this point of view, when they could go and see everything through his eyes, and his situation is going to just slant it a little bit differently. So they'll be seeing that, we've known this family all along, we follow along, we kind of know the world in which they live in, but we've never quite thought about it this way, where he's on his people, his 2 villages that he takes care of, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, he has. I didn't realize that. I don't think that the readers have realized up until this point how coddled he has been. So it'll be kind of cool.
So Nancy, how about you? Well, tell us a little bit more about what everybody's going to be stepping into in this great, it's going to be summer, or it's going to be Christmas in the islands. There we go. I got it out.
Come on to the islands for the Christmas season. Yeah. So I'm really excited because, normally my stories, have chilly temperatures and hopeful snow. If I don't get the snow, at least there's a chance of it. And there's just no chance for snow in the Caribbean. But it's nice, fun, relaxing atmosphere. It's a beautiful island home that's owned by this, rich superstar jock. And so, things are pretty fancy, and she's really enjoying her time there. But, this guy is got a whole garage full of things that he's endorsed, as a sports hero, so when she's like, well, we need to decorate for Christmas. And he's like, well, there's stuff in the garage, and there's all this Balsam Hill stuff. Like, really? How can you have a garage full of Balsam Hill and not be putting it up? Right. It's like my dream Christmas. So I'm living vicariously through him this year.
And Laura, so coming from a contemporary story standpoint, tell us a little bit more about kind of the world everybody's living in. Where are they coming from? How are they going to go deal with things? What are we going to see at the start of the story?
Well, the story starts in New York, in Manhattan, and the main character, Abby, lives a pretty prestigious life, and her husband has got a bi-coastal job. He's out in Los Angeles half of the time, and she gets a phone call out from Los Angeles that he's been in an accident. And so she goes out there, and he ends up dying in the accident, and that's kind of where she stumbles upon the fact that he's not out there by himself as she thought he was, and she's been named guardian of his 12-year-old daughter. And so she brings the girl back to New York with her and realizes very quickly that New York in their apartment is not a good place for the 12-year-old to be, but not anywhere she wants to be either. And she remembers spending summers in Bluefin Bay, North Carolina with her grandparents, and how those are some of the best memories in her childhood. And so she decides to take the girl there for the summer while she tries to figure out what she's going to do. And the island town is a small little town. It's a fictional town, but I modeled it after a nice little town in North Carolina. My Minnesota nod there is Bluefin Bay is also a bay in Lake Superior. And so that's where the name of the town came from. But it's a quaint little beach town, and they, I find water to be very healing myself, and I love spending time up on the lake and kind of being in a landlocked state. I don't have the opportunity to go to the beach, and so I was really excited to set a story on the beach. But they find the beach and the town to be a healing place as well.
Now, of course, we all know the main thing we want out of the story is, who do we get to meet? Who do we get to live through vicariously? Who are we going to experience, and who are we going to go through and go through their experiences with? So, PA, tell us a little bit about a couple of the people that we're going to be taking a trip with onto this nice little lovely vacation moon.
Okay. My protagonist and narrator is Parker, who is a woman who has had quite a bit of tragedy in her past. And she's kind of at the point where she's just had it. And she was kind of trying to go for a fresh start on this colony world that they were heading for. And obviously that doesn't work out the way it was planned. So everything that she had planned is kind of up in the air. So she kind of has to overcome her own baggage in order to help the people that she's with get through the situation. The reason that she can help them is that she has an eidetic memory, and she caught a glimpse of the destination that they're supposed to be trying to get to call for help, and the journey there. And so she's the one who kind of knows the way. But like I said, that's not necessarily her top priority. I don't want to give too much away right now, but yeah, so there are obstacles with that. But she also is somebody that feels like she doesn't fully fit in with anyone and never has. So being part of this group dynamic is very different for her. And in a way, it's difficult for them all because, like I said, they're all very different people from different walks of life. So having to come together and work together, it doesn't always go smoothly, let's just say. So they have a lot to deal with there. And there are 5 other people in this, 5 other human characters. There's also an artificial intelligence that's in there too, that is supposed to be helping them, but doesn't help them quite as much as it's supposed to. But again, it was meant to be for the colony, not the situation they're in. So there's only so much it can do too. So that's about it. And other than those characters, there's the monsters. There's a few other alien type creatures that we'll meet in this book. So it's a pretty alien environment.
Hildie. So who else, or who do we get to go along on the journey with this time? Tell us a little bit more about whose journey we're finishing out now.
Well, as you know, like I said, the youngest brother to the Laird, Gideon, is the hero of the story, but I really enjoyed bringing the heroine and her family to life because they had visited them just quickly in the end of the book before this one. But in this book, you get to meet a family of Moroccan descent whose the father was a merchant, and he decided to, merchant ships used to come through the Isles back in those times and travel through and selling spices and all that kind of stuff. So they settled there on Uist. And so it's the father is the Oram, and the brothers Tal and Arim, and then her name is Aliyah, and her sister's Dahlia. And but the mother is Scottish, so her name's Therese. And they're so funny because there's a mixture of both nationalities and their different customs. So the boys are very much Muslim, while the girls are more Scottish. And, so there's always this argument, why do they get to do this? And why the only thing they kind of they eat goat and stuff like that. They won't eat certain things. But other than that, they have a clash. So I really had a lot of fun bringing that culture into this book because it's something totally different than the other books. So you get to meet that family for the first time, and then you get to meet the two old ladies that live in the woods that are so hilarious. I can't remember the other one's name. It just slipped my head. Dorothea, and I forgot the other one, but they're funny. They just kind of always make up lies, and one of them can't keep a secret to save her life, so all they have to do is feed her, and she'll start talking. And so I can't tell her anything. She spills the beans all the time. So
I love that.
yeah, that's like they sit her down, they give her some food, and they're like, "So tell us about this man that's in your cabin." She's like, "There's no man in my cabin, but he is rather nice looking." As she's eating the food, and starts talking about it. And then she's like, "Okay, so
That's awesome."
Yes, that's really funny.
I'm getting flavors of arsenic and old lace here. So yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's enjoyable because I brought an entire new family into it instead of the people that you had seen before and somebody that's totally different. So I've had a lot of fun with them.
How about you, Nancy? Tell us a little bit more about our loving couple.
Yeah, sure. So Avery is our sports therapist, and she's very dedicated, very good at what she does. And Drew is our sportsman, our baseball player, pro baseball player. And I think the most fun character for me to kind of write and pull in was his nephew, Nico, and his sister Brooke had married this man who owns a resort in the Caribbean, and Nico is his son. And so Nico has never had a white Christmas, and this was supposed to be the year they all went skiing. And so Drew is really feeling terrible because he feels like he's ruined Christmas for his nephew and everybody because they had this big grand plan, and now he's laid up and they are not doing that. So it was really fun to kind of experience kind of the guilt and sadness and all that this guy is having for his nephew. And of course, the nephew is just happy to have Christmas no matter what, right? But when Avery and Drew put their heads together and decide to create this white Christmas, and they have snowball fight over the pool and, all kinds, they're making sand angels instead of snow angels and, paper snowflakes, the whole 9 yards. It's just really fun to kind of experience that. And just remember, that snow isn't the end all be all of our happiness. It's really about our tradition and families and sharing fun things like that. So, yeah, it's very sweet. And, kids always make Christmas the best, don't they?
Laura, how about you? Well, who else? Who do we get to really meet and get to know in the story?
Well, going, what Nancy is talking about, hers is really light and sweet. Mine's a little bit more angsty. We're starting with Abby, and I pictured her when I started the story as kind of a bird in a gilded cage. She is an only child. She, her parents were this is what you're going to do. This is the college you're going to go to. She was always wanting to be the perfect child, wanting to, do what her parents wanted her to do, and married the guy her dad wanted her to marry. When her husband got the bi-coastal job, he was working for her dad, and he's like, "No, you just stay in New York. You don't need to be out here in LA." And so she's kind of always done what she's been expected to do. And when she finds out that her husband not only had a mistress in California, but a child, and had denied her a child, something could just kind of flipped. The switch kind of flipped. And she started standing up for herself and agreed to take the child temporarily, basically until her private investigator could find family for him. And so the other main character is Cammie, the child, who is really interesting to write because she's a 12-year-old girl, or she just lost her family. She's stuck with this person she doesn't want to be with, but at the same time, she really needs this person. And it's kind of following her little journey through, the angst and 12-year-olds. Oh my gosh, 12-year-old girls are so angsty in the first place. And trying to, her little figuring out where does she fit? Is she going to stay with her? Is this just temporary? What's going to happen? And kind of how they learn to live together until, she finds out whether she's got other family or not. And then another little fun character that I brought into the mix is when they were in Bluefin Bay. on the beach. They found this little raggy dog and didn't want to leave it in the shelter because they didn't want it to end up not having a home, and agreed to take the dog also temporarily. And the dog ended up having seizures and epilepsy and the kind of angst and that caused, but also the way that kind of brought them together a little bit, because they teamed up together to kind of help the dog. And it was just a lot of fun because there's a lot of emotions in the book, but it is angsty and stuff as it sounds. It's really not, it's not a super heavy book. It's just really heartwarming, and it's really about discovery, not only from the adult Abby's journey, but also Cammie's journey as she's navigating through this new life that she's got.
How about you, Randee? So who do we get to meet?
Well, our main character is Star Weatherby, and she is an aspiring actor who's had a little hard time getting cast anywhere until she is discovered, and she is discovered by the folks at Tune In Tomorrow, who invite her to come in. So she's got her eyes wide. She's willing to do anything to help the show. And what is interesting is over the course of the book, although there are romances with at least two characters and maybe a crush on a third, her real love affair is with the show. And that emerges very slowly as the story goes on. Some of the other characters what was interesting to me is I didn't think about it this way, but until my audiobook narrator, pointed it out, there's something like 50 characters she had to voice. So obviously I'm not going to tell you about all of them. But some of the main people she meets, her main antagonist is named Fiona, and Fiona has been on Tune In Tomorrow for a very, 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 very long time, longer than even some actors in real life that we see on soaps. So Fiona is very concerned about making sure that she maintains her queen status on the show. And when Star is hired, she gets very defensive and thinks she's fallen into an all about Eve situation, and she needs to take care of business. Some of the other characters include these potential love interests. There's a Lothario on the show named Nico, and he just is, if you're new on the show and you're of the female persuasion, he's into you. And so she's a little suspicious of him. And then we have Mav, who's a little more laid back, kind of like a cowboy kind of guy. He wears the boots and everything, and he has the drawl, but he almost manages to be so laid back with Star that he nearly puts himself into the friend zone. So there's a lot of bouncing back and forth on what their motivations are, and just, is Star interested? Are they interested in Star? So those are some of the main characters. There's a lot of peripheral characters who show up. The characters on the show, once you're hired, you are given an assistant, or basically like an intern, which is this mythical creature that's a brownie. So brownies are known for being very helpful around households, and they are treated a bit like interns, which means that they are asked to do all sorts of things, and they are paid in glitter. So one of her closest associates becomes her brownie, is named Oleander. But Oleander and the other brownies start having their own agenda. They begin to realize that they are being exploited. And when you're being exploited, what do? You think about maybe forming a union. So that's going on behind the scenes. And Star has a little bit of a hand in pushing them in that direction, although unintentionally. She doesn't realize what she's doing. So yeah, those are some of the main characters. There's a lot of flavor. There's a lot of different characters with different motivations and desires, but everybody's wrapped up in trying to make sure that Tune In Tomorrow survives, because if it loses viewers, much like anything in the fairy world, if you stop paying attention to it, it kind of goes away. You have to believe in it in order to make it survive. So if they lose viewers, the show starts falling apart bit by bit, and that does happen here and there. So yeah, that's kind of the main focuses there and the main characters.
So one of the things that a lot of the time people want to know is, what inspired you to create the book, the story? Because ideas come from a lot of places, but the question is, why did we decide to take this particular idea and turn it into the story? So Hildie, what really drove? Oh yeah, I see the panicked look right now. Not only are you wrapping up the series this way, You had to have an inspiration for creating the whole series. So, but what inspired you to wrap it up this way?
The main thing is that, again, I was panicked not just now at the question, but at the fact that I had to bring the series to a conclusion and whether or not I even wanted to do that, because it has such so many readers. I have never gotten so many emails as I have with, since starting this series. So I'm like, should I keep it going? But I ran out of brothers. What am I going to do? But I think the inspiration was the fact that I needed to write Gideon's story. I had to wait for the first 5 books to go by. I even had to skip him and write a cousin first before him, because I kind of wanted him to grow up a little bit. So my inspiration for him was to show that he has finally come into his own. He realizes what a kind of a man he really is, and that he is strong in his own right. And then I also wanted to have the situation where I'm like, well, it's fine and dandy for the hero to finally realize this, but then I wanted his brothers to come in and also do the same. So I wrapped it up with, how do I say without spoiling it? There will come, there's a spot in the book where my editor said, okay, I was sobbing. I had to pull out the tissues, because it's like the family finally, you get to see everybody and you get to learn maybe a couple of things that you never knew before, and seeing their personalities and all of them interact just like you did in the very first book. And it's so different how they have grown through these years. Some of them are fathers now, some of them have, but then you have the 2 brothers that look very much alike, and how they're still fighting and competing and seeing who's better than who. So I think that was the inspiration, to bring it into a satisfying yet kind of ending where you're like, maybe there could be another one someday. So, so I am leaving it a little open, but I still go when I finish it.
How about you, Nancy? What inspired this one?
Well, there for a while, I kind of got known as the Christmas story girl, because of the back-to-back Hallmark movies and all that. And then I wrote The Shell Collector, which was the story of my heart. And it was a really heavy story. It's about navigating grief to hope and happiness. And it was a beautiful story to write, but it was really heavy. And I also wrote What Remains True, which is about a bull rider who, is going for the gold, and he meets this woman who is just kind of rebounding out of a bad marriage. And, there's a lot of family and forgiveness and trust and issues in that book. And The Wedding Ranch, which comes out December 6th, is also about forgiveness. And so 3 really heavy women's fiction stories, which you have a lot of joy in them too, but still writing them emotionally for me, was just a big deal. So yeah, my inspiration for this was that I needed a departure back to a little bit of Christmas in Manland. I needed some joy and happiness and no angsty anything. So that was my goal. And I sure did have fun writing it, and I needed that. And I'm hoping my readers are going to be really excited to, they've loved the books. The reviews have been amazing. The movie dropped. It's beautiful. But it's emotional and it's heavy and tiring. And so this is just a little nugget of joy.
How about you, Laura? What inspired you with this story?
It's kind of funny. I was on a 4-wheeler ride with my husband, and we were driving down this dirt road and trees. And in my head, all of a sudden, I just popped, what would you do if you found out that your husband had another family? How would you handle that? And I was kind of like, wow, that's kind of just a weird thing to think about, but it wouldn't go away. And then I started thinking about the kinds of things that make you change as a person, the kind of catalysts that come into your life that cause the biggest changes. And how do you navigate through that? And, Nancy mentioned the books that she'd just written, the women's fiction books, they're about forgiveness and about finding yourself, and how sometimes the best kinds of family aren't the family that you're born with necessarily, but the family that you find, and navigating through hard things in life, because life is messy. There isn't, as much as I would love to live in Nan's Christmas land, and I do love her Christmas books, and man, I would love to live in a Hallmark movie. Life is just really not like that in real life much of the time. And so for me, it was just trying to, my other previous stuff isn't like that. And this is my first women's fiction book. But going into that heavy stuff and the emotional journeys of these people, and I found it incredibly rewarding, actually, to do that.
How about you, Randee? What inspired this one?
What inspired in the big picture is a lot of years of doing entertainment journalism and just interviewing a lot of people and seeing how the shows are made behind the scenes and what the whole process is like. But the specific thing was that I was looking for something new to write. And there's a company called Choice of Games, which does these text-based adventure games online. And I had been talking to one of the people who runs it, and she said, "Oh, you should come up with some pitches for us." So I came up with a bunch of pitches, one of which was a new actress gets hired on a soap opera. I used to work at a soap opera magazine for a lot of years, and I thought, well, that I could make that wild and wacky and use all sorts of fun related things about what it's like to become an actor on a TV show. And then they liked that, and I outlined it, and then I started doing all the hard coding of it, and my brain broke, and I just couldn't get to that part of things. And they didn't own the material or anything. They said, well, we appreciate it, nice try, and you can take your stuff and you can go. And I took my stuff and I went, and I realized I had a whole outlined book, or at least most of an outline of what could be a novel. And I looked at it again, and I thought, well, what would make this funnier and more interesting and more unique is, rather than just telling another, aspiring actor story and backstage behind it, is to graft some fantasy into it. And I've done a lot of fantasy writing. I've been around a lot of fantasy authors. And I just thought, and it just kind of naturally paired together at that point. All of a sudden it was like, oh, I have a real story now. So that's really where the leaping off point was, is that I had this thing, which I'm not one of these people who normally outlines either. I'm kind of what they call a pantser, where you go by the seat of your pants and create the story. Like I have a movie in my head and I'm just reeling it out. But this, I actually had a structure and I knew what to work with. And it was actually very, very helpful. I'm going to do some sort of outlining in the future for all my books. But yeah, that was kind of where that came from. And at the same time, I'd had two more serious novels that were fantasy based, and neither one of them had sold to a publisher. My agent was like, "These are great. We can take them to publishers." And I couldn't get a publisher who wanted them. And she had said, maybe you should try something a little different, like in a kind way, not like you should try plumbing as opposed to writing. Just try a different sort of thing. And I'm nervous about writing funny, because when you write drama, if it falls flat, it's still drama. It maybe not as dramatic as you'd hope. But if you write funny and that falls flat, that's just deadly. That's just, that's so awkward and embarrassing, and nobody wants that. So I'd never really written funny. I was very nervous about it. And I'm like, well, I find this funny, but will anybody else? So even though I've had really good feedback, I had an early blurber who said it was funny as hell. And I was like, oh, I'll take that. That's going to be a blurb I want to use. So I've had really good feedback about it being funny, but even still, when I do interviews, I often am saying, well, I think it's funny. I'm told it's funny. Is it actually funny? You decide. Sort of leaving it for the reader to decide on that. So yeah, that's kind of a lot of different things came together, and that's really where Tune In Tomorrow came from.
And PA, where'd your story come from?
Mine came from an initial concept that's quite simple. I was just having a conversation with a friend one day. She'd just gotten back from a trip, and she was telling me how the airline had lost her baggage, which is a super relatable thing that we've all either experienced or know someone who has. And while she was telling me this and everything that ensued from not having her luggage, I started thinking, what if the airline had lost something even more important? Like what if they lost you? that's kind of what got the ball rolling. So for a while, I didn't really touch that idea. I just kind of left it for a while. And one day I just kind of said, I should write this. So I started kind of just exploring my characters, and it's a pretty character-driven story. So in some ways, a lot like Laura's, like it explores a lot of the things like found family and just life, the struggles that you face in life, and how life's struggles actually inform the decisions you make under pressure and things like that. So my setting might be different, but a lot of the themes are kind of similar. And I think the characters really guided the story as it unfolded, because it became a lot more than they're just being lost. It became about these people and their conflicts and the things they have in common, and just how they get through this struggle together, or try to anyway. And yeah, so that I guess is kind of the initial inspiration of that.
Well, the fun part of being an author, no matter what else anybody else says, is the idea of exploration. Sometimes it's fallen down a rabbit hole. Sometimes it is you're writing something and you realize, oh, I guess I really do have an issue with X. There's a lot of things that come out of the process of writing. Some of it's about how you're working through the process. Some of it is just the research rabbit hole. So Nancy, what's the one thing out of writing the story that you liked and went, whether it was you were doing research for something, you're like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Or it was a thing you were like, because like you were saying, you did this because you needed to kind of reset yourself and go back to the good old stuff. What's the one thing you discovered in creating this one?
Well, actually, I end up being a little bit of a crafty girl, set me loose in Hobby Lobby and I am all happy. And so I had a lot of fun with the snowflake thing. I ended up looking up all this stuff, and I went totally down a rabbit hole on how to do paper snowflakes, how to do borax snowflakes, how to dip your snowflakes in a mixture so they turn with little dewdrops on them. Way too much time on it, but it was a lot of fun for me. And I love being able to kind of pick up and have some kind of craft out of each of the books. And it makes a fun gift. I've been giving away little shells for the shell collector for the past year. My mama and I sit and hand paint them together. And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of snowflake ornaments going out this year.
How about you, Laura? As you were diving into this idea, the story, what was the one thing that you discovered going through this that really kind of surprised you?
I don't know that I ran into anything that necessarily surprised me with this one. And a couple of the other books that I've written, I have. But this one, because I've never been over on the East Coast before, I really kind of fell into a really deep research rabbit hole. And I had to actively get my husband to be like, we can't take a vacation to North Carolina. Really? It's a research trip. We could write it off. But, Google Maps and Google Earth is a wonderful thing. And I know that exploring the area, because as Abby took Cammie out there and they're kind of exploring their new area and spending time on the Outer Banks and being able to kind of virtually tour that area and learn about the wild horses and some of the trying to figure out different ways to incorporate things that are out there that aren't fictional, that people that live out there, have visited out there, can relate to as well and be like, oh yeah, we were out there too. It was a really good time. I love being able to try to do that on the stories. And so for me, it's trying to figure out how deep into that research rabbit hole you really want to go, and then being able to pull yourself back out of it.
How about you, Randee? What was the thing that when you were writing this one, you either fell down a research rabbit hole, you had something fun with? What was the one thing?
Oh gosh. I had fun with all of it, honestly. One of the things I was trying to do when I went into a rewrite, after the first iteration, I would go into every single scene and I would just like, how can I funny it up more? Like, how can this be wackier? Research wise, a lot of this just really came out of my head. So I think the research that I wanted to do is I wanted to include mythical creatures that maybe not everybody had heard of before. I mean, yes, we have a faun. Yes, we have a dragon. But I wanted to try and be a little more international about all the choices. There's a character who is a secondary character, but he's the director of the show, and he is a pombero, which is apparently a mythical creature from South Africa, which I know is ridiculous to say it's all from South Africa, but apparently he pops up all over in various cultures throughout South Africa. And he's not a very nice one. He's actually known for being pretty female insensitive, shall we say, but I make a reference that he's learned a few things and he's more reformed in this one. But at the same time, he's the one who has the rainforest office because that's where the pombero lives. And he has an entire stream in his office that is filled with rum because he loves drinking rum. So it was about, I wanted to include characters who we hadn't heard before, but I wanted to do it in a way that was true to that mythos, but also sensitive to the fact that I was appropriating them for my characters. That's not my culture. So I wanted to make sure that I was portraying them in a way that was sensitive to the culture where they came from. It was true to who they were, but also put a little spin on how they might be existing in modern mythos. So that was one. There's another character. There's actually a were-panther. I know there are were-cats. Like I have read about were-cats, but I thought, well, if you can have a were-cat, you can have a were-panther. Why not? So yeah, that was kind of where I was trying to go in terms of making sure that the mythical characters I was featuring fit with the kind of character I wanted them to be, but also responded to who they were as actual mythological characters that are very important to other people's cultures.
PA, how about you? What's the rabbit hole, or what'd you discover in the writing processes?
Well, this story, I don't write a lot of like really hard science fiction, so I don't generally have to do a ton of research. And this story, even though it's longer than a lot of what I've written before, actually required less research than quite a few of my other stories. But there was some, mostly for just to kind of add atmosphere to the setting and what was going on with their situations. So what I really enjoy, I think, just in general, is researching anything that's like science-based, because I don't really have like naturally like a lot of scientific knowledge as it is. So generally when I write anything that's science-based, I have to do research there and learn about it. And I find that fascinating. I kind of wish I'd gotten more into science when I was younger. But anyway, I'm doing it now. So I did learn quite a few things, just little detail kind of things that I find super interesting. Like, for instance, when my characters first land on the moon that they end up on, they're in an escape pod, and the pod, part of it's the way it lands, it's more than land. It basically just drops onto this moon. So it has these airbags to absorb some of the impact. And I borrowed that from NASA doing that with Mars rovers, so things like that are just like little details that I incorporated into that. So thanks, NASA. And then because I have a really diverse cast of characters, I had to do a little research into just their backgrounds, give them a little more authenticity, like just with things like colloquial expressions, their names, things like that, because they're from all over Earth. So that sort of thing. And I guess the closest to going down the rabbit hole would probably be just research into survival strategies, which they do need to use a lot. So things like prioritizing, having a shelter or finding water, building a fire, things like that. And I had to figure out how they're going to do all that when they're not on Earth, which is interesting. So so that sort of thing. And that to me is all fun. Like, I don't know if it is for a lot of writers, but I really enjoy research. It's part of the fun for me. So I had a really good time just finding all those little things and going like, ooh, they could use that. They could try that, whatever. So that's kind of how it went for me.
Hildie, I'm almost afraid to ask.
Well, this is what happened. So I'm in the 6th book of the series, and I decide, I've never been to the Outer Hebrides. I should be describing it better. Never mind, I've already written 5 books in the series. So I go to YouTube and I follow these guys. This a young couple, and they have an RV and they have a little dog, and they go all over the Hebrides. And I'm watching them going, oh, this is really cool. I described that perfectly. And all of a sudden I'm like, there's no trees. There's no effing trees anywhere. No trees. And I freaked out because so many of my scenes are running through the forest, are hiding in the forest. Things are happening in the forest. The archers are attacking from the treetops. So I binged watched the whole YouTube series. And then I went to another one. Then I went to another. The Vikings. He said, thank goodness for those. But now I found out, good, there used to be forests on the island. So that was really like a oh crap moment that got fixed by the Vikings. But what is he saying? You're muted. I'm glad you're muted because I don't know what you're saying.
Probably a good thing. You froze up a little bit as you were running through the trees and running through the forest, but it sounds like you finally figured out there used to be trees there.
There used to be trees there. Isn't that interesting? No, it's not. That was probably the most boring thing I've ever discovered.
Yeah, but here's the thing. All the trees went to go for cabers and caber toss. That's where all of them went to.
I know I had Highland games going on. That's right. I even had Highland games and stuff happening against trees through the, what I'm saying? That could not happen, but thank God that there were trees before the Vikings came. And I have no idea when the Vikings were there, but we're not going to worry about it.
I can give you the dates later. But
okay.
Well, guys, it sounds like we've got a lot of stuff to stack up on the to be read pile. However, before we get out of here, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you and how to get those new releases. So, Laura, how can we make sure to find you? Website, social media, the new releases, all the good stuff.
I am on social media as @Laura Ashwood Books. You can find me on the regular Instagram, Facebook. My website is lauraashwood.com, and my new release is available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Apple, Kobo. It's called Summer at Bluefin Bay, and it comes out, ebook releases tomorrow.
How about you, Randee? How can we find you?
Well, if you can see my name here, it's randeedawn.com. It's pretty easy. Just Randee with 2 E's, dawn.com. That's where all my stuff is. But if all you can remember is the title of Tune In Tomorrow and you go to tuneintomorrow.com, that will take you to a web page that tells you everything you need to know, blurbs, reviews, and links. Tune In Tomorrow is available in all your normal bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you don't see it, ask for it and they will order it for you. They can do that kind of thing, and we love it because that tells the bookstore that you want it and that there's a need for it to put it on the shelf. So go to your local bookstore and ask for it if you don't want to order it online. So tuneintomorrow.com or randeedawn.com. Either one of them will take you where you need to go.
PA?
Probably the hub, I guess, for everything about this book would be my website, which is pacornell.com. And there you'll find there's a page that's dedicated to Lost Cargo, and that will have all the details about it. It will be available through all the usual suspects like Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, all those. So I will have links for all that there, definitely on the 12th. And you can also find just my full bibliography on there with links to other stories. You'll find upcoming things that are coming out. All my social media has links there as well. So pacornell.com is the place to go. And I'll also be sharing links when the book comes out so that people can find it more easily.
Hildie?
I am always on Facebook. I'm always on Facebook. So Hildie McQueen on Facebook. I also have a website, hildiemcqueen.com, but I don't think it's updated right now. But you can still go there because you can see my other stuff. And then this series is exclusive to Amazon, so you can find it on Amazon. And yeah, they're all on KU, so free if you're signed up for whatever that thing is called. And I'm also on Instagram, but not that often. I'm always on Facebook though.
And Nancy.
Well, Facebook kicked me off last year for 10 weeks. So I'm still on Facebook and Insta and Twitter and all that good stuff and Pinterest, but come see me at nancynaigle.com, and Naigle has an I in the middle of it, Naigle. And that'll take you everywhere you want to go. You can download free book lists, and there's little links across the top to all those social media platforms, so you can still follow me there.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculativefictionacademy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And now go stack up those to-be-read piles, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you.